I would like to welcome Ms. Wafa Yusuf from the University of Bahrain. Ms. Wafa will be speaking on a transitive analysis of D.H. Lawrence, the Rocking Horse winner. Welcome, Ms. Wafa.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
By University for this amazing opportunity. This actually is my first time presenting at a major event, and I'm so thankful and humbled by this opportunity. So thank you so much. Here you go. Now you can see me. Allow me to actually thank the organizing committee. They have been amazing. They've done a great job since the beginning of 2020, I think. I hope everyone is safe and doing well. My name is Wafa Yusuf. I teach English at the English Language Center at the University of Bahrain. I'm also a published translator, and today I'm here to talk to you about my research paper, which uses transitivity analysis to analyze one of D.H. Lawrence's most famous and most controversial short stories, The Rocking Horse winner. So let's start. Here we go. And my first question to you is, what is the pyramid and what is it made of? Now, let me reassure you, ladies and gentlemen, you have not been transferred to another room. This is not a history class. But before I start my formal part of the presentation, allow me to take a few minutes of your time to introduce you to my topic by telling you how I actually came up with it. This is very important for me because it will give you an idea of the line of thought that I follow in my presentation and the whole drive behind my presentation today. Now, before I started working on this research paper, I had not a very pleasant relationship with linguistics as a tool of analysis when it came to literary texts. Back then, and quite some extent now, literature to me is this magical world where the writer is this amazing illusionist who could trigger emotions, memories, questions, thoughts in our heads by means of written words. And this fascination, this biased view towards literature actually prevented me from having any scholar attachment to linguistics. Now, linguistics to me seemed to be, and I mean, no offense by that, but it seemed to me like a distortive tool rather than one that would lead to any appreciation of the literary text of the writer whatsoever. After all, in my head, I thought, how can one be fascinated by the Great Pyramid of Egypt if we just dismantled these huge blocks of stone and exhibited them one by one and analyzed them one by one? I mean, literature to me was that pyramid, and I was not going to ruin my pyramid by tools offered by linguistics. This is what I thought. But at that time, I was supposed to write a research paper within the scope of applied linguistics, and literature was my passion. So I had to find a way. So I thought, you know what, I'll face what I most feared, and I'll just, instead of reading into applied linguistics, I'll just change my whole direction and start reading into literary criticism. And this is what I did. And throughout this, I thought, okay, an attempt would not be harmful. And as I read into literary criticism, I came across this beautiful philosophical notion, this amazing approach to literature called deconstruction. Now, I'm sure you've heard of that before, but to me, deconstruction actually changed my whole point of view towards literature. Because for a long time, the literary critic and the linguist inside of me were fighting. We're not on good terms at all. And deconstruction seems to have reconciled both of them. And deconstruction, now what's happening between the literary critic and the linguist? The literary critic would take everything that's outside the text in order to arrive to an interpretation of the text. So the context, the historical background, the mental state of the writer, and then they arrive at an interpretation of the text. The linguist on the other side would accuse literary critics of intuition because it's not, their interpretations are not based on scientific grounds. And this was the whole concept of the fight between the two. But deconstruction actually is interesting because deconstruction says that the meaning that's constructed in the text has nothing to do with the writer of the text. And this is an absurd idea at the beginning, but actually deconstructionists call for the death of the author, which means that the role of the writer in constructing meaning in his text ends with that last full stop he adds to his text. And this is, I think this is one of the most amazing ideas about deconstruction. And they say that the meaning is actually generated in the reader's mind during the reading process by the text and the text only. So deconstruction is about allowing the other to speak out. And I thought, wow, this is an interesting idea. The more I read into deconstruction, I realized that the pyramid I thought literature was not actually made out of these huge blocks of stone anymore. It's made out of more fragile elements. You know, this structure we make out of playing cards? This is what literature looks like to me right now. This was like, as Oprah Winfrey would say, this was my big aha moment, because I realized that literature is actually made out of words, and words are very fragile. According to deconstructionists, words don't have meaning in themselves unless we associate them to other words. And this is exactly the magical thing about literature. We use words every day. We all have access to the same set of words provided by our own languages. Yet very few of us would take these fragile, trivial words and make beautiful pyramids out of them. And fewer still are those who would take these significant components and build great pyramids out of them. Pyramids that defy the time and the elements. And I was like, yes. So deconstruction would lead to appreciation to the text and the writer behind the text, because the more I believe that at some point in the reading process, the whole text deconstructs itself into those fragile, insignificant components we call words, the more I appreciated the mastery of the creator, the builder, the man behind the text. And I was like, yes, perfect, deconstruction. I'll just get a text and I'll use deconstruction. But then it hit me that deconstruction is not actually a tool of analysis. It has no rules, no strategies, nothing. It's just an approach and a philosophy. So I thought I was back to square one, and I thought, okay, but I was determined. So I said, okay, let me find a bridge between literary criticism and applied linguistics. I know they hated each other, but I'll try. This is what I said to myself. So I started reading again into applied linguistics, and I came across this amazing branch of linguistics called stylistics. And I was like, where were you my whole life? That was like, as Oprah would say, my second aha moment. Then within stylistics, I found the tool. I found transitivity analysis, and that was my third aha moment. I found it. I found my bridge. So from then on, all I had to do was to start a process of compatibility between the two, between deconstruction as literary criticism and stylistics as an transitivity analysis. And yes, in the beginning, they seemed very different, but very opposite. But throughout the study, you will notice that what I did was a very simple process. I made up for the weaknesses of one by the strength of the other. And I can say, finally, the linguist and the literary critic in me have finally reconciled. And this is how I came up with my topic, transitivity analysis of D.H. Lawrence's The Rocking Horse Winner. Now, both statisticians and literary critics are concerned with the meaning constructed in the text. But what makes statisticians a little bit more credible in their interpretation is that they discuss the text on more scientific grounds, away from intuition, which is like the main accusation that literary critics face. The specific stylistic framework I used in my research paper is called Transitivity Analysis, and it aims at analyzing the text at the level of the clause. It says that the verb is the most important part of speech in any language, because it gives you the experience of the user in the real world. And so what I did in my research is that I just identified the transitivity patterns in D.H. Lawrence's Rocking Horse Winner. And based on these patterns, I formulated a possible interpretation, an interpretation that is based on science, on words, on everything that's inside the text, nothing from outside the text. And then I compare the linguistic interpretation of the story with other existing interpretations reached through literary analysis, because again, my goal was a reconciliation between the two. Now, what I believe makes my research paper interesting or significant, if you want to, is that it uses a linguistic framework to explore a text that has never been explored linguistically before. And it adds to the studies done on prose, which are lacking in the literature, and provides scholars who are interested in stylistics in general with this is like the most important point. It provides them with a rigorous, retrievable, replicable model of analysis. So this actually makes this research paper useful to scholars, other than the interpretation of the text itself. Now, on the other hand, it explores this particular text, and I chose this particular text because it has been discussed extensively within the scope of literary criticism, but never from a linguistic point of view. So I'm not saying that we should replace all the other approaches with this approach. I'm just saying that this research offers new insights into one of the most complex texts of the 20th century. Now, I don't want to go into the details of transitivity analysis and how I came up, how did I use this tool? But I think it will suffice to say that systemic functional grammar, where I got this from Halliday, regards language as a system of meaning, and it focuses on the construction of meaning through grammar at the closed level. And this is amazing, because now we have scientific grounds to actually interpret text, and it recognizes three different strands of meaning. And my research paper focuses on the ideational metafunction and how do you analyze the metafunction. The ideational metafunction is through transitivity analysis, which actually identifies certain processes based on the verb itself. So let me just quickly show you how it is divided. Halliday recognizes 6 different process types: material, behavioral, mental, verbal, relational, existential. Each of them has their own meaning, has their own meaning of representation of the world. And this actually helps us in literature because it shows us the characterization and the text. And this is another beautiful word from stylistics, mind style. It is how the character in the text thinks, how they represent, they see the world as a representation of themselves. And so the process itself was so complicated at times, easy for some people. What I did is that in an Excel sheet, I just analyzed the text verb for verb, sentence by sentence. So I'll just give you an example. So this is one. This is the exposition, the first part of the story, and then as I go on, I would identify the process and the subtype of the process as well, just to arrive at a detailed interpretation of the text. And then I had to divide my text, my story, the storyline itself, so I can actually trace the changes in the process types along the storyline. So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but I used Freytag's pyramid, which identifies 7 parts of storyline: exposition, inciting incident, rising action, conflict, climax, falling action, and resolution. Now, I'm sure we don't have time to analyze all of these, but I'll just give you an example. Let me show you an example. For example, the exposition, the beginning of the story. So you can see that in the processes, the exposition seems to show a balance between material and mental processes, because in the exposition and the beginning of the story, you can see that the reader is introduced to the external world of the family, and that's why you see material processes are high in number. And then in the same exposition, we are introduced to the world of the inner world of the mother. And that's why the mental processes are high in number. Let me give you another example before Sophia shows me the 3 minutes sign or 2 minutes sign. Let me go to the last part of the story, or maybe to the climax or the conflict. Let's take a look at the conflict. Now, look at this. The conflict witnesses a dramatic decline in material clauses and a tendency towards mental relational clauses. And this is because in this part of the story, the mental clauses describe mainly the ideas and feelings of the two main characters, Paul and his mother. And the relational clauses are mostly of intensive attribution characterizing mental states. So in the conflict, you could see that there's a fight between mental clauses and material clauses, between the exterior world and the world inside the two main characters. And let me go quickly to the last part of the story, which is the resolution. It shows again a balance between material and mental clauses. And this is interesting because actually it indicates the vagueness of the ending of the story. It's a resemblance of the exposition. If you remember, the exposition has the same balance. And because in the story, it actually shows this vicious circle of ongoing problem in the family at that time. Now, before Sophia would just show me another sign, let me just say that again, after that, I arrived at an interpretation of the two main characters, Paul and his mother. You can see that Paul shows a collapse of mental processes, because at the end, the boy, Paul, fails to balance the material world with his affection towards his mother. And in the end, he actually dies. And you can see that mental processes take most part of his character, and then the behavioral processes are increased at the end. Whereas the mother, look at the mother shows a more static line, because the mother actually, towards the end of the story, she fails to reconcile the material world, the exterior of the family, with whatever she feels inside. And this is interesting because now we can see that the interpretation is based on something, on evidence that's inside the text. And now I can say that finally I can reconcile the literary critic with the linguist. And because this was my goal, I had to fit this linguistic approach within everything that was said about this particular story. And after looking into all the articles or the approaches, I found out that the psychological approach to the story was actually the most approach that was compatible with my own approach. So we can say that yes, the literary critic was correct. The story has a psychological approach. Maybe it's, for the literary critic, they would say it's D.H. Lawrence's own relationship with his mother, and that's how they base their interpretation. But now I can say, yes, it's true, because evidence from the text scientifically show that the psychological approach is actually the most suitable interpretation of the text. Now, this is actually, I come towards the end of my presentation, and I just want to say that there's a beautiful book called The Handbook of Critical Approaches to Literature. And in that book, it says that to be able to appreciate a work of art, a great work of literature, one should be able to appreciate it from as many angles as possible, and as many perspectives, as many approaches as possible. And for me personally, I think that every great work of literature is open and legitimate to a linguistic approach. So if you notice in our literature classrooms, we usually start with language style as a pre-reading activity. And I think it's about time this changed, because the language of literature is actually something that the writer takes into consideration when they write their own masterpieces. And with this, I would end my presentation. Thank you so much. And I hope it was clear, because it's a long research paper, and I hope I was able to get my idea across to you. Thank you so much. And I think Sophia would like to share some questions or discussion.
Thank you very much, Wafa. That was very interesting. It was very clear, an interesting approach on transitive activities with linguistic approach. And thank you for the suggestion about the book. That was great. If there are any questions, can you please post your questions in the Q&A? There's a comment in the chat that said everything was very clear. Thank you very much, Wafa.
You're welcome.
Anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I'd like to add that we need more studies into stylistics. And of course, we need more studies into specifically mind style, because this can go farther than just the scope of literature. Imagine if we can actually analyze, I was thinking about this yesterday. Imagine if we can analyze suicidal letters, actual suicidal letters from people who committed suicide. We might find interesting notions or aspects that have led them to commit suicide. I was thinking that might be a good topic for a research paper. Instead of using something called literature, we can use authentic text and analyze how the writer represents or find a representation in the world, how they feel about the external world by writing, because I do believe that our words actually represent us as people. They represent the processes that go inside our mind, and it goes beyond the scope of literature. I started with literature because I needed a solid ground, something that has been discussed. But I think we can take this further, and with the help of this notion of mind style, maybe we can analyze real characters in real life and see their tendencies, and we can take it further to workplace or our character in the family. Maybe psychiatrists might find this useful, but I think it can go farther than just analyzing texts that are made or based on language.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a great approach, and I look forward to reading it once you start with this research. Thank you very much, Wafa.
You're so welcome.
Everyone in the chat is saying thank you very much. Amazing work, very clear presentation. There aren't any questions. I really appreciate you coming today.
Thank you so much. And I would like to thank Prince Sultan University again for this opportunity. It's amazing to see this connection, and it's amazing. I was really surprised to see a symposium that takes stylistics into consideration. I was looking for this for a long time, and I'm so thankful and humbled by this opportunity. So thank you so much, and thank you, Sophia, for moderating this presentation. And please send my regards to the organizing committee. They've done a great job catering to everyone's needs along I think since March or since February. So thank them on my behalf.
You are very welcome. Thank you very much, Wafa. We look forward to you participating in the second symposium eventually, inshallah.
Thank you so
Have a great
much.
day. You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone.